right. Well, welcome, to the February community meeting for Central Park United Neighbors. I'll go through. My name is Liz Stolniker. I'm board president for Central Park United Neighbors. Other folks in here, we can introduce ourselves as we have questions or want to speak. Are also board members, and other folks are joining us online as well. I'll go through some preliminaries about Central Park United Neighbors. CPUN is the registered neighborhood organization for the Central Park community. We provide a working forum for the residents of Central Park to participate in creating, developing, and fostering a vibrant urban community dedicated to social equity, environmental responsibility, and economic opportunity. At our meetings, we facilitate the discussion of key issues with neighbors, engage in proactive problem prevention, and amicable problem solving. CPUN is committed to providing an inclusive and welcoming environment for all members of our community. Our mission is the betterment of the city of Denver by providing a forum for residents living in Central Park to discuss and resolve issues, serve as a network of communication, and a means of acting on matters of importance to the community as a whole. We promote public service, civic discourse, and collective efficacy. We're an all-volunteer board of Central Park residents and a registered 501c3. Just quickly go over our agenda. This is our community hour, and we're joined by guest speakers and representatives from Stockdale Capital, which who represents the Shops at Northfield apartment development. So we'll be getting updates on that and have an opportunity to ask questions and have that conversation. At 7:20, we'll have community partner updates. And then our board hour begins at 7:35. Committee report outs, treasurer's report discussion of the INC is asking if we want to co-host the screening of Join or Die, which is a documentary on civic engagement. Then we'll discuss the INC survey, requesting feedback to give the Office of Community Empowerment. At 8:10, we'll do board updates, community survey update, board recruitment needs, and our look ahead for our March meeting. And so now, without further ado, we will be hearing from Don, how do you pronounce your last name? Cloutier, the general manager for the Shops at Northfield, and Sean Maley with CRL Associates. And I will stop sharing my screen so that you can share your slide deck.
Am I right up to the front or?
Oh, no, you can just speak from here. It's mic'd.
Oh, okay.
So,
Mic test. Like Andy, do you want to switch with me so I can sit next to Don so we don't have this side by side deal going? Don's gonna hit me now when I get out of line.
I think to stop sharing.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much for the introduction and for hosting us this evening. My name is Don Cloutier. I'm the general manager for Shops at Northfield with Stockdale Capital. I've lived in Central Park from 2016 to now. I actually at one point in 2019 moved from Central Park to Central Park. And so, you know, in that time, acquired 2 dogs and 3 children. We are kind of living this suburban dream here in this master plan community we've got. And so previously I was with Dairy Block downtown. It's a mixed use kind of forward thinking sort of activated alleyway, really cool kind of local artisan market type of a vibe. Oversaw that comprehensively. And I got a call about Northfield. And I was listening to, you know, kind of what the company was talking about in that vision. And I said, well, that's exactly what I would do. So here we are almost 2 years later, articulating everything we can as publicly as we can, kind of our hopes and dreams for this shopping center, you know, this sort of heart of Northfield, if you will, and this real opportunity to deliver what I think the community has been asking for a little while now. So again, thanks for having us. To introduce you to Stockdale Capital, we are a private equity firm. We specialize in mixed use real estate. So we tend to buy things at the best price we can. And, Northfield, not a lot of investment in Northfield. The ownership group was restrained in what they could invest in tenants that they could build out. And there was a lot going on with the previous ownership group. So we came in and we thought we got it at a really good price, which is important. And then the second element of that obviously is executing on that business plan, which means meeting the market and meeting the constituents and meeting the residents exactly where they need us to in order to deliver that kind of modern shopping center, modern mall, mixed use, densified opportunity of live, work, play. And so walking through that, just generally speaking, in this 15-minute village that you see there on the slide, we focus on kind of the community, the heart of the project, the community park. And so reinventing that Main Street area is pivotal. We've gotten some news publicly recently that we were aware of, obviously, but it's public now with JCPenney and Macy's leaving. So repositioning those anchor tenants with modern uses and appropriate uses that are going to drive more interest, more traffic, more sales, more tax, more. And so that's the next piece, entitling multifamily and creating that kind of suburban hub is key as well. And so that's going to be a big part of our conversation today. And so along those lines and executing on all of those facets is pivotal to our plan. And I'll obviously echoing back a lot of what we've heard from the community as far as hopes and aspirations and what we're delivering. And so, I think as it relates to the community from a charitable standpoint, a cultural standpoint, a community standpoint, an inclusiveness standpoint, and obviously relevant for me, the family matters. It's really terrific to work with a group that has a standpoint of, we need national retailers, right? We need regional retailers, right? But there is a desperate need when contemplating what the best mix of tenants is going to be as local as we truly can. And having started, I was a trainee at Town Center of Aurora at all places in my very first mall, 13 years ago. And so Suleiman, he ran the coffee shop there in the food court. And who other than his nephew now owns and runs Coffee Origin at Northfield. And so it is just this wonderful ecosystem of entrepreneurs that you would never know, that have no fear of hanging a shingle. And I take a great deal of pride in being the person that oversees that leasing program that brings in those entrepreneurs and those business people. And we are really delivering a local flavor of somebody that lives in the community, believes in the community, and to the extent possible, continually reinforce those opportunities and that expectation from the shoppers. And so I'll just kind of keep rolling here. As it relates to Main Street, we think that this is pivotal. There's plenty of asphalt on the periphery of Northfield. There's definitely plenty of parking. But we really have an opportunity to create is a relevant hub of green space, of child's play, of a sound stage, of the tap room. We have the kiosks there shown, the larger white images. Grab a burger, grab a beer, hang out, do some shopping if you'd like, but really be that central hub. We think is paramount to the execution of this project. I will kind of wrap it up here. I'll let Sean kind of take away a couple more of the details, but as part of that business plan of Northfield, we've committed about $2 million of asphalt work in the last 2 years on deferred CapEx. I always laugh. It's deferred, but after a while, you just didn't do it. And so prior ownership kind of not doing it gave us a real opportunity to come in and immediately make some of those enhancements. We made minor tweaks to where that park project will be with the grass and some of the other play elements, which is great. More to come there. The roofs, they were starting to resemble Swiss cheese. There were some leaks, right? And how are we going to attract relevant retailers? Not with that. And so there's been another significant investment in a lot of a lot of those roofs as well. The leasing activity out of the gate with Nike, Sephora, Lululemon, whose sales are pretty wonderful, and all indications are that this pop-up will transition into a permanent lease deal next year. That's insider baseball. You're supposed to hit me on my leg when I said that. PF Chang's, so just really reinforcing that relevancy on the leasing track as we execute this business plan. And then, like I was talking about, those anchors, right? So not at liberty to really share exactly who, but there are really dynamic, exciting conversations being had with the folks. If you just kind of scroll on Facebook, you might see exactly who they're hoping for, and that's kind of exactly who we're talking to. So more to come on all things business. Happy to chat, happy to drop a business card and continue to communicate and reinforce the vision. But I hope that serves as a at least mediocre introduction to our company and what we're hoping to accomplish at Northfield.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, and so my name's Sean Maley. Work for a company called CRL Associates here with Nathan. We kind of help in municipal planning and rezoning and community outreach. We're joined by Chris here is our traffic engineer with OV Consulting, and Andy is with Kephart, kind of architecture and planning. And so we kind of have a what we're calling a concept presentation regarding the northeast quadrant or parcel for redevelopment. If you can go to the next slide, please, Nathan. Okay, this shows it perfectly. The whole property is about 90 acres. Don describes it well, saying there's plenty of paved surfaces and parking. Not a lot of green space. It was really built.
If someone's I'll unmute them, but someone's unmuted.
No worries.
Unmute you. Okay.
I just didn't know if it was a question. It was kind of built exactly as it was planned, kind of in the early days of this redevelopment. As times evolve here, decades later, kind of have the pleasure of, I appreciate Don's overview about what Stockdale is looking to do with this site. And so we'll specifically be talking about kind of our proposal for this red area. If you can proceed, Nathan. So when doing this with the city and looking at zoning, you kind of start with what the city plans say for the area. So this part of town is covered by 3 plans: Comp Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver 2019, and then there's a Central Park Development Plan from 1995. Blueprint Denver provides kind of the most recent guidance on this site from a land use perspective. Next slide.
Is that Central Park Development Plan we call the Green Book?
Yes. So Blueprint, you can see the site here in kind of dark green, kind of talks about Denver's growth strategy. And this is where not all, they have these maps all throughout the city, but there are certain hubs, certain centers where they want to direct future jobs, future households too. So this site is one of those. Next slide. And it also identifies the site as an urban center and a regional center. So kind of a higher mix of uses, living, dining, shopping, 24/7. I was like, 24/7, but I guess they're meaning that people living here go to sleep and there's still activities. I don't think there's shopping and entertainment going on at all hours of the night, but a higher degree of kind of urbanism and walkability.
One 24-hour restaurant now, the Indian restaurant at the 29th
Okay.
Town Center.
There we go. So putting it on the map as a regional center. And so Blueprint kind of also for these urban center, regional centers, kind of talks about building scale and intensity. And it kind of calls for larger scale mixed use buildings and heights generally being the tallest in the context. It talks also about responding to kind of neighborhood context. So, whereas in other urban center, regional centers, you would see heights much, much higher, like a Cherry Creek. We're cognizant that this is not a high-rise neighborhood, and so we're not necessarily thinking that. Next slide, please. So this finally gets us there, where we show kind of the northern part of the site with a very rudimentary concept for the 16 acres, and the residential and the park and the green space, and then how that kind of fits into the central green space and kind of Main Street. So preliminarily, we're thinking 5 and 8 stories. Honestly, we put the 8 stories in there not because it has to be in a location, but we think if anywhere, probably closer to the center of the site. And furthermore, having varieties of building heights, I think, is better than one height across even 16 acres. There will be other architectural moves. There will be other pedestrian realm moves, other placemaking things that we seek to do. From a pedestrian standpoint, to the north, to the east, to the west are important connections that we need to make. So, we're at a very early stage. And so I stress again that we literally just kind of threw this on a diagram right now. These are not kind of building designs, but essentially, one thing that the site I don't think has any of is there's not one single residential unit on the 90 acres, right? You've got shopping, you've got parking, you've got some office space, but you don't have what can complete it as that 15-minute village, which would be some housing and some residential and more green space to fit in with the other green space. So the central Main Street park improvements, that Y shape, if you will, Stockdale has already submitted, they're called site development plans to the city. They've been in for about a year. City hopefully those will be approved sooner rather than later. One of Don's slides kind of covers more of what that is. So we're kind of leading with that green space. The rezoning application will be for that northeast. I'm calling it a quadrant, but it's not a quarter of the site. It just sounds better. Next slide, please. This just kind of shows it in closer up. I'll proceed to the next slide. This is some of the placemaking, some of the pedestrian, some of the walkability connections. These are precedent images. They're not designs, but it's stuff that Andy and his team and Chris and his team and we give to Don and his team to kind of think about for inspiration about how, as you can see, they're investing real money into this place. And so how do we make it, a jewel and make some interesting moves? So, especially as we think about the perimeters of the space and how these new buildings interact with their surroundings. Next slide, please. As you all know, there's some very important kind of regional connectivity connections and issues here. This is a map where we kind of put up, quarter mile from the site. It's fascinating that you can be at the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Arsenal, connect to all that Central Park has to offer, these regional greenways. We also know there are some challenges there. So part of what Chris's team will be doing is kind of a traffic and mobility study, where we look forward to future dialogue with your board, your committees, your members to kind of talk through those issues and what are ways where we can be helpful while continuing to build out the site. Next slide. I think we can kind of skip this one. It's just another closer in view of the site and some of this. This is all just kind of draft stuff where in the questions and answers and future meetings, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges again that we see. Next slide. So as I mentioned, part of this plan is to build residential. We think that's conducive for the commercial. We think it's conducive for the work, live, play, the 15-minute village. City and County of Denver passed what they call the EHA, or the Expanding Housing Affordability Ordinance in 2022, requiring percentages of new residential construction being affordable at certain levels. Kind of cuts off on the right, so I'll explain it. So the typical or kind of standard requirements for they have two, not to get overly complicated, but there are two cost areas. So downtown and Cherry Creek are kind of these high cost areas. So it has a slightly higher percentage of affordable units. Everywhere else outside of downtown and Cherry Creek are considered typical cost or standard cost markets. And 8% of new residential units would need to be provided at area median income, or AMI, up to 60% AMI, not to exceed 60% area median income. We have another slide that kind of breaks that down a little bit more. This site being over 10 acres follows what's called a high impact development plan. So properties that are over 10 acres kind of start at 12% or more. So we're going to be doing 4% more affordable housing on this site than.
Sorry,
No worries.
Wi-Fi kicked me out and I had to leave.
So there'll be 12% of, roughly, it allows some flexibility in conversations with the city's housing department. That department is called Post. And so we're interested in feedback there, but, I think this is something that Stockdale is very much in support of, that we believe is vital to these types of centers and these properties. Next slide, please.
Can you just actually say what that definition is there on the bottom of 12% more units?
Like thinking if you have similar dreams together.
Yeah.
I've never done that in a past relationship. And so I love doing
That's
it.
so
I'm like, oh my God, like there are actually men who.
All right,
Oh, boy.
sorry, it took me a second to find, like, first. Okay,
He's trying to make
Okay,
noise.
so on the, oh, shoot.
It's
Yeah, thanks,
actually,
that's what I was- So the 12% or more of units,
Can you go back a slide?
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that's what I want. Okay, so 12% or more of units need to be at or below 60%
Correct.
AMI?
Correct.
Okay,
And there is some flexibility in other ways to say, so if you'll allow the next slide. So yes, we will be required to do a minimum of 12% units. And the standard kind of AMI is not to exceed 60% area median income. And so you can see here that the way HUD, Housing and Urban Development, kind of sets these area median incomes are by household size. So 1, 2, 3 person all the way up. We've kind of circled in there what that 60% AMI looks like for a 1-bedroom, for a 2, for a 3 person household. But part of that high impact development plan and some of the other optionality with host, for instance, we've heard feedback about, building from 60% all the way up to say 100% AMI, which is kind of hits more of like the missing middle, if you will. This is not publicly subsidized housing, so doing less than 60% AMI is really difficult to make happen and probably wouldn't happen. We know there are needs within the city of households and incomes below 60% AMI. The mayor, the city's working on that. That's typically a bit more of what you'd call subsidized affordable housing. This is kind of that market affordable housing where we think kind of our starting point is 60, but we have received some feedback even from city council about the importance of thinking from 60 to 100, including kind of that missing middle spectrum.
Can I just ask, so these are all for rent units? Or will there be a mix of for rent and for sale?
We're assuming for rent. I mean, one of the bills Nathan and I are following very closely this legislative session is construction defect or construction litigation. That is an issue that is, in my opinion, is a lifelong, all but 2 years of my life in Colorado, and increasing housing advocate, I would say, having 3 kids as well as Don, wondering where and how they're gonna live around here. Since 2007, we've had some state legislation that's made it very, very, very difficult to build condominiums. You're virtually assured a class action lawsuit. And that's not because mistakes happen or don't happen. Mistakes happen, anything built with human hands. But there's legislation this session that, I thought it was going to happen last year. That we were going to get a real fix. They did a little bit in 2017 on construction defect, but it did not move the needle. So typically in a healthy housing market, to answer your question, Liz, about 20% of new units would be condominium construction. You'll see that in other states. In Colorado, we've been hovering at like 5% since 2007. And as you can tell, I get pretty fired up about it. Point being, though, that unless that changes, you're going to continue to see product being built at a for rent. Really only at these extremely luxury price points can you make the condominiums really work to absorb the exorbitant cost of insurance. Yes.
And you'll be will it be like financed with like the tax credits, like the LIHTC?
No.
Oh,
So
it
that
won't.
that would fit into
Interesting.
LIHTC, will go up to 60, it'll be 40 to 60.
Okay.
That is I would call that public resource. It's a scarce resource. We will not be competing with LIHTC, or we have no plans to be doing a LIHTC project here, which we think is beneficial for that, again, market kind of conducive housing here. LIHTC's a whole different kind of
Yeah,
ball game.
we've talked with other affordable
Yeah,
developers.
yeah,
Using that. So-
yep,
Okay,
yeah, that's a good distinction.
Hold on. I wasn't sure what area, and since you've been giving the concentric circles, I just really quickly Googled what area the AMI is defined for. And it looks like it's the whole county. So
Mhm.
just because,
It's all of Denver.
yeah, it's not anything that's like site specific.
Correct.
County.
Correct.
That's for others too. Okay.
Yeah, good point there. Good point there. So this is hosts material on the right. There's some links. They provide some AMIs, some incomes. I think and Don would know it. I think even more so than some of these. Not that these are not great folks to have living in the neighborhood. Are the very workers on the property itself. That's something that we see importance of. So next slide, I'm trying to think what else we have. Yes.
The chat, will the units, sorry, I just lost it. Will the units at 60% AMI be available at the same time as higher priced rentals?
Yeah, good question. The next slide actually will be able to kind of combine all of that. So the answer is yes. So kind of where we are, and that kind of cuts it off. So so we have submitted the
Minimize.
I know, unfortunately, I think it's over.
That's okay. It looks like you guys have it on your screen and I can verbalize it. So we submitted our rezoning application. I was going to say this month, but it's already somehow past the middle of February, January of this year. Typically city council and the city staff timeline for a rezoning application is 6 to 8 months. After that, if approved, the zoning, we would move into a site development plan process. After that, you would need to get building permits. So we are thinking, construction, if all goes well, starting sometime in 2026. And the property would be, it's 16 acres. It's not going to be built all at once. So it's likely you'd see kind of that north building built out first, and then the others subsequent, or maybe that central one, but I think we're kind of thinking maybe that north building is the one that leads. You know, each of those buildings, I forgot to provide kind of estimated kind of number of units. We're thinking anywhere 1,000 units, maybe more. So if you think any building has, you know, 300 to 300 units, you generally don't see more than like, you know, 350, 400 in a building there. Yes, each building would have affordable units in it. We wouldn't have one designated affordable building and build the other market rate buildings first or something like that. The thinking is it would be integrated throughout each building that would be developed kind of over time.
So they're physically integrated.
Yes.
This is the first project that's done that.
In this neighborhood, yeah.
Thank you.
Everything else has kind of been consolidated, huh?
Yeah, just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one question I have is you were a little elusive on some of the tenants, but I'm assuming that grocery is part of the consideration in that area, given that you're going to have such a huge influx of people.
Right.
That we don't have a lot of grocery stores in the southern part, but yeah.
Exactly.
So, just also to let you all know, we're currently actually doing our community survey, which as a resident. But we have a question on there actually about what people would like to see in developments north of I-70. So there's like,
Yeah.
anyway, we'll have some feedback
Oh, that's great.
to share with you all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we think that this plan is again kind of conducive to some of those other uses on other areas of the site that you know, aren't going to be kind of redeveloped in a plan like this now, but kind of each piece kind of, you know, helping to kind of complete and fulfill that vision. Next slide. So just touching on a few things, you know, as I mentioned, we will be doing kind of a traffic mobility study. I know you guys have a Safe Streets Committee, so we'd really love to attend that and bring Chris and a couple of us and, you know, hear more. Don knows it. Actually, our attorney who's not here lives in the neighborhood as well. But we want to hear about, I don't know, those daily getting around.
We'll also have some survey feedback on that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Thanks
We've
for
got a
saying
few
this.
questions, yeah.
Definitely invite you to this.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, even bike and pedestrian safety stuff that is part of that traffic mobility study. You know, the open space, kind of the programming, we got a really good question about kind of you know, outdoor, you know, almost music or performance space, you know, at a previous meeting. And so little programming pieces on the open space. Of course, there's going to be parking for the new buildings. You know, it's not marketable to not build enough parking and then have people parking across, you know, major roads and things like that.
We do have a question about that in the chat, actually. Also, I'll just, on the parking, for residents, will it be garages or surface parking?
I don't know if we've determined that at this point. We're kind of in a very preliminary phase of kind of how we're thinking about it. I mean, obviously subterranean is very expensive. You can kind of, you know, build it within the within a structured format, kind of not subterranean, you know, and then surface. But I don't know if we've made that decision, have we?
The best way to put what we have to do would be that all of the parking for that residential has to be contained within that 16 acres. Right, so there's going to be some degree of garage parking, and there's going to be both. And so above grade, below grade, that's kind of TBD. But you know, we want the pedestrians to flow out of it, right, and the cars sort of hidden within.
And then just also, is the, I guess as the kind of apartments or project residential only, or will there be any office or retail space like within that development as well? Or is it all a commercial spaces kind of outside of it?
I mean, I think TBD. I don't think that we would be thinking a heavy concentration of kind of retail there. But I think, on that Central Park area or a key corner or access point or something like that, I think there could be some opportunity there. We kind of, not to sound vague, but I've been doing this almost 20 years, so I just kind of have really gotten to understand kind of the development process. Until you really start designing projects, you're not going to really start designing projects until you kind of understand what the zoning is and if that's going to be approved. I believe you guys also have a design review process here that we
You
would.
guys, I was gonna say, have you already gone to the design?
No, so again, that's kind of
So-
more on once you have the site development plans, that the building by building, there's usually when there's design review, there's a thick book of design standards and guidelines and 10 statements and guidelines that you have to meet. So I'm assuming that there's probably a good amount of guidance within those documents that will inform kind of the site development plan process. I don't know if that's something that you would like to see or would not like to see. I mean, part of it also is this balance of looking at the whole 90 acres and kind of how it works, right? And keeping kind of that tenant mix and making sure folks are successful across the site. So, not a definite answer right now, but an honest answer about kind of where we are and how we're approaching that. And then, I imagine, or I've picked up, that there's a lot of interest in particular uses and things like that. And that's why Don's here. He's the master of all that stuff. And so he sees it, he hears it, he's good at it. And so, we imagine there's kind of questions on that, but that concludes our presentation. Kim was not able to attend today, but I don't know if you guys know Kim Cronin. She's part of Don's team here. She's very integral to kind of our process and the outreach that we're doing. And so thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
And one of our board members is the primary person on design review, and so I would strongly encourage that those conversations.
Yep.
Yeah, he's not, we have a few folks who are not able to join us. tonight,
Yeah.
so he's
And
not-
we were thinking of, I think, either meeting with just Jack or whoever Jack would recommend, knowing that we don't have building elevations and plans to submit right now, but just getting an early dialogue on all that.
There used to be a separate process, the design review committee, which is a closed meeting with architect and Jack. And then a zoning and planning meeting through the SDC, but with the sort of tapering down of development that the zoning and planning, which was like sort of the public arm of that, doesn't exist as like a reoccurring meeting. But when you are ready to bring forth plans for like public feedback, I don't typically, historically, and not ideally, I think that the developers would go through the architectural review first and kind of and say like, and here's what we've like approved to like go forward.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what are we doing? So, I mean, if you wanted to open it up but it depends on like what aspects you would actually want feedback on, if it like how iterative you want it to be. I mean, I know that, that sort of thing would be like, if there were areas where it would be beneficial to have that level of feedback from the community, you could time it before, or you could just sort of do it as like a public release after.
Good to know.
I think that does like bring up just kind of, I don't know if you want to go back to the timeline slide.
Yep.
Just kind of understanding. So it sounds like you don't have to do a large development review for this site.
Correct. Good question. So, typically, let's see, properties 5 acres and above in Denver after like 2019 go through LDR, large development review. We actually, knowing LDR comes before zoning, you kind of submit this pre-app request to the city about LDR. So we had assumed that we would be doing large development review. we submitted and the city took some time and got back to us. And because there was a general development plan, a lot of what they're looking at is like inner site infrastructure, utilities. They've got other ways to handle the open space, like other requirements. They've got other ordinances that handle the affordable housing. So kind of the agency said, due to the general development plan that was done when this property was first built out, some of the other extensive planning buildings on the site, it's not a greenfield site per se. It's more of a redevelopment than a greenfield. They're like, LDR is not required. We still hit parts of the LDR, in my opinion. The fact that we're 16 acres means we're smart enough to know we need to do a traffic and mobility study.
I was wondering, what is the timing on that then? If so, you're looking at 6 to 8 months for city council review. Do you have a date before the planning board already? Or
No,
okay.
but typically if, let's just say July to September could be city council, that would put planning board,
Just before.
you know, call it, it's 6 weeks. Yeah, so like June, maybe late May.
And so would the traffic study be done in before that then? So like, does that, I guess I'm just kind of
But
understanding.
with the zoning, yeah, I think,
What's the sequence?
kind of twofold. I think, yes, in terms of like answering the fundamental questions of what these residential units, what the mix of uses would mean from a site wide and kind of around the site infrastructure and traffic standpoint, yes, that'll be done with the zoning. It'll kind of be in a, I don't know if you'd call it final format, but there will be a continued evolution of that as we then take those next steps to designing buildings, actually having exact numbers of units and start to think through kind of the exact kind of where the public realm meets the private realm and those infrastructure moves. But yeah, so there will be, Chris, do you think I get that right in terms of like, there will be a traffic study that and a mobility study that kind of walks through and envisions what the rezoning means, but that it has to kind of then continue throughout the build out of the property as we, you know, do other things, right?
Yeah, it's a little different. I mean, the LDR process spells it out a little more specific, right? So since we're doing this kind of little different path, the information related to potential impacts and mitigations and how it might affect the system, because you need it by planning board, right? So they have that information to consider when they talk about the rezoning application.
And that's part of the application that you guys will.
It's not actually part of the application.
Okay.
It's more like supportive information than like an official document.
Yes,
Okay.
that's a good way to put it.
That makes sense.
The iterative process there is figuring out like the unit composition. So how many like 3-bedroom, any 4-bedroom, I mean, that never happens. But since you used the language earlier, like the missing middle, I don't know if like part of that was coming up with a product that doesn't really exist on the market, which would be like higher bedroom number units.
Yeah, that is certainly kind of part of the high impact plan process and kind of feedback. It was interesting. It was kind of, you know, you all might disagree with it, but it was actually Host, kind of they did all these mapping and surveying of kind of housing diversity and found that you know, this area actually has less than what they see as in the optimal number of for rent units and apartments versus some of those other for sale or ownership units. And I think that's due to it's the mastery of kind of how Central Park was built out. I mean, it's such an amazing mix of single family townhomes, apartments, things like that. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to be doing townhomes here, you know, or what I would call attached product of like row homes or kind of brownstones. I think there's definitely some like, there's some opportunity for kind of, you know, those walk-up units and how they interact with the streets that kind of, to me, give a bit of a townhome brownstone feel on the ground floor. I think there's opportunities for that. In terms of the bedrooms, you know, probably 1 to 3 bedrooms is kind of what we're thinking. But again, I don't know if we figured all.
1,000, about 1,000 units between 3 buildings.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000 could be more. It will kind of depend on kind of the unit size, the composition of units, things like that. So kind of continuing to figure that out as we go through this outreach process.
I just wanted to get, there's a couple of questions in the chat that I just also wanted to make sure we got to. So one is for the 2 anchor stores. So this is a question for you, Don. Will those be anchor stores again, or will they be split into smaller retail?
It's highly likely that one will be 1-for-1, a replacement with a really compelling fitness concept.
These bicycles. Yeah.
Somebody's unmuted and I can't find
Trisha, mute.
Sorry.
unless Trisha. Trisha, did you want to, since that was your question, did you have any follow-up?
And then
Sorry, my
the other will
teenager.
likely,
Sorry, I do actually have a question. Sorry. It skipped out. You said that one of them will highly be what?
ideally a fitness concept. And then one will probably be cut up, but not like maybe to 3, right? You go from 1 big box down to like 3 uses within that big box. Most likely, if all things go to plan. And
Okay.
some of these, are relatively imminent. So just a little fun story time with Don for a second. The Northfield, when you get Target, when you get Macy's, and you got the developer involved, and there's a million restrictions on what we can do and where we can put what, and the maps are like pre-awesome photocopier days, and we are parsing through a million pitfalls. But the demand is there from the concepts that everybody wants. It is just really finding out how to plug these in to satisfy all of the retailers' parking needs, right? We can't just pile in everything on top of each other and you can't get in and out of the place. And so my attitude towards that is the program manages itself very, very well. You're not going to have a world-class health club come in if they can't park enough people to fill the club. And so that's actually one of the fun things. And the not fun thing, right, is to how the existing people or the existing tenants maybe provide waivers required to get certain uses in certain areas, give up a little bit of protection over a parking space 100 yards away. And so there's really it gets to that level as we work through these things. But if everybody had their way, I mean, we'd be done. We'd be announcing the plan. It is really, we are down to those final details as it relates to this next wave of really exciting tenants coming into the project.
So in terms of with what you just said, you're talking about more like the giant parking lot in front of it, right?
So a lot of different areas are protected across all of the parking. And so uses matter, parking matters. It's really, we're modifying to do 1 lease right now, we're modifying 6 others to achieve the proper waivers and the rights to do what we're trying to do. And it's just the convoluted nature in which Northfield was constructed and built. And it's just the nature of the beast. And this thing was built right in 2007. Well, what was 2008? So you've got the great financial crisis. So the way business was done in 2007 is frankly not how it's done now. We're working backwards through, multiple crashes, multiple evolutions of, what is retail, what is community lifestyle center, what's mixed use, what is an appropriate parking ratio, who's driving, walking, Ubering, you name it. It's a lot.
And you started with a developer who immediately sold the property, and that's been sold at least twice, if not 3 times.
And honestly, that's the benefit, right? So it was built well before its time, right? It's a mall in a field, and now it's a mall embedded in 5,000 residences. And so now people are ready, they're here, they want this type of a community center. But it was built overly accommodating to some of the existing uses to get it done. And so we are unwinding as much of that as we can. And you know, it's funny, I get to scroll through some of those Facebook comments and who's saying what, and I'm like, yep, that'd be good. Yeah. And so, and you know, we've all willing parties. It's simply a matter of making sure logistically we're able to plug them in. And when you talk about construction defect and the look back, and if you did something wrong, those penalties can be pretty massive. So it is a process, and I'm excited to say, you know, hopefully the announcements are imminent.
We're pretty much at time. We do have kind of one person asked about grocery stores in the chat, which
Yeah, I would just say there's a conflict that we need to resolve, and we've got a willing party to come to the show.
Okay.
So I just, you know, fingers crossed.
That answer, I was gonna say fingers crossed and stay tuned. So the last question actually, I think is also in the chat, just to kind of close it out. At what phases will Central Park neighbors have an opportunity to provide input in the program and design of the development, since 2026 is fairly soon for construction? The neighborhood would appreciate providing feedback on a more detailed plan. And I guess when you get to the point of the site development plan.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the design review.
And we can kind of, even add maybe more detail to this slide here to touch upon that. So, the way I view it, and we actually kind of had a pre-meeting, before this meeting was set up, and it's another cold, snowy day. It was the day after the election. We met up at the coffee shop, actually, a few folks here, and kind of ever since that time frame, Nathan here has been kind of in communication. So I'd say now through the city council review, and then through after that, we know we've got design review. And so we'd welcome, additional meetings going into the site development plan stage. So I would say we're in that phase. We're still in the early part of that phase, and that we've got at least a year. And so if there's additional meetings where we can kind of come back, that's what we get paid to do, is engage with the public and collect that input and make sure that it's heard and digested appropriately. And so, and if that is mini sessions, one more transportation mobility focused with your Safe Streets Committee, and others are focused on some of the other stuff. I don't know if we'll have fully designed building plans before zoning. It will always kind of be this mixed, adding residential to make the site more of a mixed use element. And so I could probably say, just because I've been doing this again in quite a while, that we're not going to have it. It just costs a lot of money to produce that level of detail. And no capital is going to kind of do that until they understand if the zoning's there or not. But we'll be completely upfront and honest and give the most accurate and honest information as possible. But there will, again, that's the beauty. I'm actually a proponent of design review, despite being a housing advocate. Some people would argue that design review kind of slows progress of development. I think design and the way things are built out are very important. And so that's kind of a helpful feature in my opinion. And so providing those additional opportunities about what is it going to look like, how it's going to feel, how will it interact with, the public realm and the neighborhood as a whole.
Yeah, and I would say if we were to move some dirt in 26, it would be the latter part of 26. And then to call it done, you're looking at a decade. It's going to take time. And then even when we say 26, that's really if everything along the line goes as prescribed. And that relates to cost of construction, cost of capital, absorption, the ultimate density we decide to go with, and everyone think, so, and then the phases from there. So there's some work to be done. We're a couple of years into this thing. We're tracking, but we're gonna have pivot points most likely. That's a good point.
Well, yeah, I think that just, we appreciate the communication.
Yeah.
And just, we'll kind of hopefully like send you the feedback we get from our community survey.
Yeah.
And then just kind of keep lines of communication. So
Just know, like, we put our contact information up there.
Yeah.
You've got Nathan's contact info.
is it possible for us to just kind of clear, because we put the recording up on our
Yeah.
YouTube channel? We
Absolutely.
can just link to the slide deck
Yeah.
as well. And what-
Really good question. How did I not include that? So I think it would be CMX 5 and CMX 8. To get a little,
So you
dorky
can
and
explain what the
wonky. Yep.
CMX stands for.
so C stands for urban center. And in Blueprint, it calls it kind of urban center. So they take the C from urban center. That's the C. MX, mixed use. MX, mixed use. 5 and 8 is the stories. The only thing that I was gonna say is kind of a dork is, this area is kind of more of what I would call a suburban context. But it was interesting that Blueprint called it an urban center, which is that more urban type look and feel of buildings. So I'm assuming we're gonna be having kind of conversation with the city about kind of how to blend. As Don put it quite well, it was built out, before the world is changed a lot. And so, but yeah, great question. CMX 5, CMX 8. And that would be the maximum building heights for the parcels. Again, we were thinking that 8 would be that more interior to the site, furthest away from the neighborhoods, closest to the heart, the hub of the site, and then stepping down towards the perimeters. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ben. If that's all right, those are really excellent questions and appreciate you guys and we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Move on. I think we have our community partner updates right now. I think actually it's the city council meeting is tonight because yesterday was President's Day. So I think actually, I don't believe Jesse is on, so we can move on to Lieutenant Hides, if you can give us a DPD update. We can't hear you, Lieutenant Hides. Oh.
Oh, no, he is.
No, he is.
Yeah. Not.
Well, we know that we can hear
How about now?
people on the phone. Hear me?
Okay,
Now,
we can, yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think my computer was trying to jump around to another device, so I'm glad I checked on that before I started talking to myself. So anyway, thanks for having me tonight. For anybody on the call who doesn't know me, I'm Kevin Hines. I'm the Denver Police Lieutenant responsible for the Central Park neighborhood in District 5. I'm going to jump right into some crime stats just to give you an update on some stuff we talked about last month. We've actually seen some improvements across the district. In District 5 as a whole, violent crimes down 18.4% for the last 28 days, and property crimes are down 31.6%. Overall, that equates out to a 25% drop in crime for the district. Now, we did see some differences between our two precincts. In precinct 511, which is the area north of I-70 and includes the mall, we did see some really good improvements in larceny, which I talked about before as primarily being shoplifting crimes. We were up dramatically last year, about 96%, I think, for the year. So far this year, we're down 54.8%. So seeing some improvement there. And also seeing a corresponding drop in auto theft and theft from motor vehicle cases in that area. We have seen, in case any of you do follow crime stats for Denver, we did see a big jump in robbery cases. They're listed as business robberies. Most of those were what we refer to informally as aggravated shoplifting cases. That's where an individual was leaving a store, got confronted by an employee, and may have shoved or threatened an employee as they were running out with something. So when we see a business robbery, it doesn't always mean that, you know, somebody walked in with a pistol and menaced somebody and said, give me the money in the till. Some of those, in this case, most of these are cases where it was what we'd call an aggravated shoplift. Overall, precinct 511 is looking pretty good, though. We're down 45.8% in property crimes and 38.4% in total crime in precinct 511. Now, as we jump to precinct 512, which is the area south of I-70 in Central Park, we're not looking as good right now. Total crimes up 6%, violent crimes up 66.7%, and that is being driven primarily, I mean, the majority of it by simple assault cases. Some of these cases can be explained by the addition of a warming shelter that's opened at 4040 Quebec Street. We have an extra 200 people staying there right now on a part-time basis during this cold weather snap, who were recently unhoused in the community. We have noticed a large increase in calls for service out at that facility since the warming shelter opened up. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what's happening at, and 4040 Quebec is the old DoubleTree site there on Quebec Street. What we have there since beginning of last year is a non-congregate shelter on the hotel side of that building, where individuals are in the program on a longer term basis and are assigned to a room. That's a normal operating procedure over there for roughly around 300 guests. With the cold weather we've been having this winter, the city elected to use the old ballrooms in the hotel as a warming shelter. So that is a congregate homeless shelter, and it's serving on a part-time basis. Essentially, any time that the weather is below 25 degrees Fahrenheit or anticipated to be below that for any length of time in the next few days. So at this point, with long-term forecasts, we're looking at a possible closure of that shelter again, probably at the end of the weekend. But right now it's housing an extra 200 people, and we are seeing calls for service out there that are affecting the crime numbers in precinct 512. There are some points of light, though, to mention in precinct 512. We're still looking good on auto theft and theft for motor vehicle, and those are two areas that throughout the district and the city were really troubling to us a year ago, and those are continuing to trend down, down 61.5% over the last 28 days, and our year-to-date rates down 77%. So still looking really good in that area. I think the biggest thing we're seeing right now is just an influx of new people and some issues over at 4040 Quebec. One thing I was going to talk about that we're jumping into this year is a greater emphasis on quality of life crimes that are taking place in the city. The mayor's office is coordinating with our department with a new task force to address that. We're going to be putting a lot of resources into the area around Northfield Mall and also Quebec Square. Those are two of our hotspots where we're seeing a lot of these property crimes and quality of life crimes. So you'll see probably more police presence out there in the not too distant future. And we'll also be doing some more operations, more coordination with businesses and stakeholders in the area, property managers and things of that nature. Just trying to make it a place where people feel that they can go and comfortably shop and park their car and not worry about their car being broken into and things of that nature. So that's something we're kind of working on right now in the Central Park neighborhood. I know I also have technician for, sorry, you'll have to excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here. I also have technician Ferenz on tonight, and I think she has some updates on at least one of our upcoming events here.
I do. Good evening, everybody. The only thing I have right now is our commanders meeting, which will be this Thursday at 6 p.m. and virtual. I'll drop that virtual link in the chat for everybody. But again, that's always on the third Thursday of the month. So again, it'll be this Thursday at our District 5 station. And that's it.
And
Well,
I want to be
had a
cognizant of everybody's
question.
time, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have as well.
I think you might be our only community update tonight. Since,
Oh.
I think, nobody is on here from the MCA and, Daria had to go from the library. So, I mean, we still can move it along, but I know Amanda had a question.
Yeah,
Sure.
so
Hi,
I
Amanda.
just with the, hi, Kevin. In the chat, I put it there. Do you know when the doors close on the shelter, how people are dispersed into the community or not into the, like, what happens when the 300 people who are being housed in the warming shelter are no longer being housed in the warming shelter?
So that has been a subject of much debate, and as you can imagine, there's several different stakeholders involved in that. Our role as the police department is advisory in this capacity. What we have been told is that we will be given advance notice before the shelter's closed, so that we can have some of our resources on site during the closure to try to help things move more smoothly, discourage encampments from forming in the immediate area and things of that nature. Additionally, we've provided suggestions to the Salvation Army and Bayard Enterprises, because we have two different operators operating the two different sides of the shelter at that site, on things they can do to discourage loitering in the area. For example, during the time that the warming shelters open, there are temporary bathroom and shower facilities in the parking lot. And we found in the past that people will actually take up residency in those if we leave them open. So at the closure time, we're going to be making sure those are taken off site again, or at least secured, so that we don't have people living in the bathroom or shower stalls outside. The city has said that they're going to provide buses to take folks back to their point of origin, or where they wanted to get to within the city. The last time around, I don't know that that went off quite as well as was hoped for. So I think we had a lot more people loitering around in the area than they originally were expecting. So there's been some discussion. I don't know if a final resolution has been arrived at yet, but there's been some discussion about how to make sure that we're giving folks a chance to get back to where they want to go, because we don't want to just kind of go, hey, we closed the doors and, good luck, you're outside here. So that's still in discussion. Obviously, we're not going to be forcing anybody to take a bus ride anywhere, but we are encouraging people to be able to have that option if they want.
Thanks. And then my second question was just, you were here for the first hour of the meeting. Thank you. And so you've heard the owners of the Northfield Mall area, which are just like right across the interstate from that corridor. Are you including them in the head count of businesses that you're in contact with for preventive strategies?
Yes, we actually had a business watch meeting earlier today, and Northfield businesses and the security team from the shops at Northfield were all included in that. That meeting actually focused on that specific area. So the two areas we're focusing on, our big operation right now, is the Stockdale Capitol property up there in Northfield, and the Quebec Square area. So those areas are both getting focus right now. And we communicate regularly with their security team, with Clarence over there on the operations side. So trying to facilitate as much communication as we can, because sometimes they're aware of trends that we're not aware of, since they're boots on the ground all the time, and it helps us to adjust our strategy so we can be a little more effective up there as well.
Lieutenant Hines, there's a question. Helen's got her hand raised. I have just one question to clarify something you said, and then we'll go to Helen, I think, for the last question.
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify, you said there are two operators on the 4040 Quebec site right now. So is Bayard operating the warming shelter and Salvation Army is operating the non-congregate shelter? Do I have that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, Salvation Army is the full-time operator there. They run the main non-congregate shelter. And then when the warming shelter is being operated, Bayard Enterprises comes in to run that side of the facility. So So we've been having weekly meetings out there with them to try to make sure everybody's coordinating with each other. There's other security concerns we deal with, such as the fact that with all the problems we were having at the beginning of last year, the decision was made to make the non-congregate side of the shelter a secure facility with security guards and weapons screening. The same is not the case for the warming shelter. So we have a kind of a division of the building going on where we're trying to make sure that we keep the security in place that was promised to the one side of the building while still allowing ingress and egress for the people who are there on a temporary basis. So yeah, but to answer your question more simply, just, yeah, two different operators, one for the non-congregate and one for the congregate side.
Thank you. Helen, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great, thank
Hi,
you.
Helen.
Hi, Lieutenant Hines. Thank you so much for your update.
Sure.
I have a child at Swigert Elementary School, and this school year I don't have data, but it feels like there have been more lockdowns, and I think some of them have been related to the commercial area that's nearby. So Swigert's on, for folks who don't know, it's near 35th and Quebec. It's on Syracuse. And I believe sometimes when there's some activity going on in the commercial area where, that mall area with Walmart and Home Depot, if something is happening there, it impacts also school. And at least once or twice this year, I feel like we've had something going on where students were no one was allowed to go in and no one was allowed to leave the building. And it feels to me like there's more going on this school year than in past years. So I'm just curious if there has been any discussion on that.
Yeah, and Helen, I would say I can definitely understand your concern as a parent with a kid in school. I'm in the same boat there. So when you hear about lockdowns, it's never a comforting feeling. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been anything particularly unusual that's happened at the school itself, which is a good thing. In terms of how many lockdowns there have been this year compared to years past, I don't know that number either. I will say, out of an abundance of caution, we always prefer to lock down than find out we should have locked down and didn't. So the schools will often make that choice to lock down when they see us in the area engaging with somebody, or if we're in a case where we call out a reverse 911 and things of that nature, or when we request that the school locks down. Obviously, the proximity of the school there to Quebec Square and all of this area puts you in kind of a busy area right now. We've certainly had more happening out there, which is one of the reasons that this area is getting such a focus from the department in terms of trying to address those quality of life issues. Again, I don't know of any specific threats at that school that I can think of right now. Danae, are you aware of any out there as well? She's our community resource officer, and sometimes that gets routed to her as well. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything there.
No, not that I'm aware of. I know those decisions are made by the school, as you had mentioned, and I'm not entirely sure what their protocol is when they make those, unless, like Lieutenant Hines says, a reverse 911 is made, which to my knowledge, I don't think we've made any of those. But without digging into it, I'm not entirely sure.
But to your point, Helen, I'm not necessarily surprised that there might be some more of that out there, just given the fact that we've had a lot more police presence out there. We've been dealing with, members of the unhoused community out there that have been, occasionally having issues along the Quebec corridor there. So it's hard for me to quantify without data to say exactly how many more we have had, but I will say that your point kind of draws into the entire purpose of our operation out there, which is the perception of crime and the perception of safety is something that we believe is very important here in Denver as well. And if whatever we have going on in the city is making citizens feel less safe and less safe sending their kids to school, that's an issue we want to start working on in that area to make sure that people feel safe conducting their daily lives, going to school, going to their jobs, patronizing retail establishments and all of that. So I appreciate your point on that, because I think it kind of speaks to some of the feelings of insecurity people are having in the area right now that we want to address.
Texted the
Thank you.
principal who was able to provide that data, and her response is that they've had one lockout this year because of an issue near campus, but they've not had any lockdowns. They've only had drills. So one lockout, no lockdowns, but drills for all the things they're required to drill.
Now, Amanda, how would I guess that if anybody could get that information immediately, it would be you? Nice work.
I love Swigert. We're a Swigert family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
no.
you. I think we're at time right now, Lieutenant Hines, but we'll share out the information on the commanders meeting that's happening on Thursday. And if we could get the slide deck actually to share in our newsletter on Monday, I think that would also just help get this information out to the community.
Yeah, certainly. And Danae, you can
Yep.
get that over to them, I assume, right?
Yep, I can share that.
Well,
Thanks so
thank
much. I
you for
appreciate it. All right.
allowing us to have some time with you tonight, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. All right. And then we are now into the third hour. And I think that usually we have like 5-minute stretch break, but I think just like people who need to stand up and move around, like feel free to do so, but we can just kind of move on. It's interesting. We have committee report outs right now. I know Carol is traveling. I think she's on a plane as we speak. So I'll just read the bullet points for education and safe streets. Education committee, they've changed, the meetings are now bi-monthly on Wednesdays at 5:30. And so looks like they're every other month on the even numbered months. So the next meeting will be Wednesday, April 9th at 5:30 p.m. over Zoom. And then for safe streets, Amy and Carol usually have their quarterly check-in with Maggie at the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Due to family illness, they've had to reschedule that with her. So they'll have an update next month on their conversation with Maggie. I'll also just report out, I went to the RNO Leaders Lunch at the District 8 office with Councilwoman Lewis and her staff. And during the portion of that, when we had to talk about different needs in our community that city council can help with, I specifically talked about the intersection at MLK and Central Park Boulevard. That we all know we have, like, that was bond funded in, I think, the 2019 bond. And there's a big question mark of what happened with actually implementing the design of that intersection. So I asked Jesse in that office to focus on getting us an update on what is the status of that? Why isn't it part of the capital improvements plan for the area? And then what we can do to get that moving again. So that's kind of just generally safe streets. Another thing, just to kind of stay tuned for, we're working on we're actually in the process of trying to schedule a bike event at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal in the fall. So it's an opportunity to kind of bike from the neighborhood into the Arsenal and possibly do some trail riding. The day that was originally proposed by the folks at the Arsenal is September 27th, which is actually the Deadwood Country Ride. So we don't want to conflict with that because it goes up Central Park Boulevard. And I think there are probably actually several residents who will be participating in the Century Ride who possibly want for the Arsenal ride. So we're working on rescheduling that and potentially also partnering with Montbello Organizing Committee. One of their community engagement folks is also on the board of the Friends of the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, whatever the wildlife refuge organization is. And so he's interested in partnering the Central Park on mobility and transit, stuff. So, stay tuned for that. The DEI committee report out, I don't know, Mantle or folks who are in that, if anybody wants to do a report out about that, but I think just generally stay tuned for, we're doing a day at the state capitol following up from the meeting we had in November with our, legislative representatives. This is an opportunity for Central Park residents, basically as like, kind of civic engagement 101 with our state legislators during the legislative session. So that'll be either in late March or April. Board members, you got a doodle poll about that. If you're interested, send out your availability. But I think that that will be a really good event for just to, actually like be paying attention to what's happening at the state level and in our community. I do have just two things that I put in the speaker's notes, just that there's a free day at the Denver Art Museum this Saturday on the 22nd. And since it's February, it's Black History Month. And actually February 19th, tomorrow, is the Day of Remembrance for Japanese Americans, about Japanese internment during World War II. There are two exhibits that at the Art Museum that are relevant to both of these. So there's an exhibition of street portraits by Dawood Bey, who's an amazing street photographer, about just kind of portraits, beautiful portraits of Black community members in his neighborhood in Brooklyn. And I think that just as a neighborhood organization and thinking about our community, it's a really great exhibit, just to kind of to be thinking about in relation to like our community and also Black History Month. There's also an exhibit called The Life and Art of Tokyo Uyama, who was actually a Japanese American painter who was interned at Amache internment camp. And several of the paintings, it's about 40 paintings from his catalog. And several of them were actually made while he was at the internment camp. And it's just really beautiful and eye-opening. So I would just encourage folks to, if you want to go to the free day, check out both of those exhibits in addition to the rest of the regular collection. And then I'm kind of running through this. I guess, is there any, health and safety, like David?
Updates
Yeah.
too. Yeah, that's okay. I went to Councilwoman Lewis's community event, town hall event on February 8th. And there were some interesting things that I thought that she talked about. So they did some studies or some research about median incomes by neighborhood in District 8. And their office actually divides out Central Park and Northfield, which I think is kind of interesting. And Central Park and Northfield are the only neighborhoods in District 8 there where the annual household income is above like that does not qualify as like low income. And so I thought that was interesting. The District 8 office is also putting together community panels right now to inform the 2026 budget. And so those start on March 1st. So if you're interested in joining a community panel, you can email the District 8 office. And then also some capital improvement projects that I thought were interesting. Some new projects that they're doing, $200 million for regional park build outs, $25 million for Sand Creek improvements, and then they're reinvesting some money, $70 million for a bridge replacement over back. So not sure which bridge, but one of them. The Good Neighbor Committee for the Mayor's Office around housing and homelessness met on January 29th. The Salvation Army let us know that 266 people were permanently housed from the Doubletree and the Best Western sites. There were 373 people permanently housed from all the Quebec corridor sites, so that includes the Comfort Inn as well. They did say, which I thought was interesting, that Lieutenant Hines said this too, they did say that because District 8 has carried a lot of the burden, if you will, for some of the all-in Mile High sites, that the Doubletree is supposed to be used as one of like the last resort warming shelters. And so but they're still using it. We talked about like ways to distribute information, just to get information out using the front porch.
It's like a constant struggle with them, is just like, give us a blurb that we can like share with the community and in those meetings, so.
Yeah. We also talked about maybe ways to incorporate Fusion Studios into our group as well. And then the city has also done some maintenance on both the Best Western and Doubletree buildings. So it opened up 56 additional rooms that weren't being used at the Best Western and 75 rooms that were not being used at the Doubletree, so for the non-congregate shelter. And then earlier today, I thought that this was kind of interesting. I attended the Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety meeting, and that group is currently reviewing contracts with the city and how that money can be maybe be reinvested into the community. And then they're also planning to do some community navigator violence prevention trainings. They want to hire some community navigators. What that would look like is being an ambassador to neighborhoods, connecting with trainings and resources, canvassing neighborhoods, attending RNO meetings, supporting reconciliation and relationship building in communities experiencing division, and then just kind of mediation as well. Sure, yes.
But I'm glad it's.
Yeah, so somebody's thinking about it. So yeah, it's just kind of a matter of funding, but yeah, that's sure.
Replacement, I would imagine it's Smith. We're
So,
Yeah.
yeah. The city funded, which makes me actually have a question for you. What's going on with Smith Road extension? Sorry. I
That's
do have
okay,
a
go for it, yeah.
Jack said they were green lighting it
Okay.
with
As
Park
part
Green
of
money.
like the parcel eight development?
I think so.
Or- Okay,
I think that will be included, funding will be included in the next.
Okay. So when would that start?
I have no idea. Hopefully next year, but I don't. They keep saying that, you know, construction's supposed to wrap up, you know, any day. I don't know the timeline. Jack.
And is the reason that the District 8 office divides Central Park at I-70, are those our current census tracts? We used to
I'm not sure.
I think it's
like
a
it-
single census tract, but I think just in terms of thinking about the needs of like the neighborhood, like since you have the newer build out
Yeah.
north of I-70 versus like south of I-70, I think there's
access like
slightly
grocery
different
stores.
we get information about income and broken out in that way, in that
I'm
case?
not sure. I used a partner, I believe, called Be Connect or Be Connected. I think it's where they do a lot of like survey. I'm not sure.
Well, that's like demographic data on like the income. I mean, wouldn't that be census data?
Well, yeah, but then it would be split vertically, like our census
Yeah,
tracts.
but I think they're just saying like the combined like 80238, like unlike kind of the other, I guess, statistical neighborhoods in the
So they
district.
combine
So
them and then
I
just
think they
split
combine them for that, but yeah, in the way that they talk about it is. So, no, I appreciate that. I just have a quick question because I think there's two health and safety things. So Amanda, you're making, you're scheduling the meeting with the woman from Colorado School of Public Health about the THC thing.
Yes, I don't know who the,
I was gonna say,
I don't know the person, yeah.
okay, I was gonna say, I had no question.
On THC. Name was, I don't know what the rest of
Adam or
Yeah,
something,
okay,
or no,
yeah.
oh my.
Yeah.
that person, yeah.
But yes, and then David, I just had a question because I think we were going to have the woman from the domestic violence.
Yes, so I actually heard back from her today.
Okay.
And that was a question that I had as well. Did we want to do a training or did we want her to come and speak to the meeting next week or next month?
Well, next
Either
month
way.
is gonna be Metro Districts, so
So that's what I,
it'll be the April meeting.
okay, yeah, that works. I'll ask her to move to April. So,
We just do a training. Can we
Well,
use
either way.
that time to do a training?
During the April meeting?
Or?
I mean, sure, I mean,
I mean, if there's-
we can do what we want, guys. It's not like so.
Is April the election and everything?
No, that's May.
May, okay.
So that's May 20th. So I mean, if we want to do like a training around like domestic violence, like that's, yeah.
Recognizing it every.
And before we get off of this topic, actually, anyway, I know that, I mean, it's not necessarily related to Central Park United Neighbors, but I wanted to acknowledge that like the loss of Megan Trussell, from our neighborhood. She's the Steve Boulder student who was missing, and was found dead. And so it's been on my mind, like, just really like, so I just wanted to express my condolences and hopefully the board's condolences to the Diaz Trussell family. And if folks are okay with it, there is like a memorial fund, I think, and I wanted to just share that out in our next email, just to, so that folks, I mean, we just have like, lots of neighbors who are very connected with that. And so I think that we usually don't share out that kind of stuff, but I think that I think it would be important. So, any objections to that?
Not at all. They were my neighbors, in my first house here. Not neighbors direct, like 2 blocks over, but like,
Yeah.
like block sort of get-togethers. And yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we like acknowledge that because I feel like it is like a really heavy thing in the community right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just take a moment. We do have to move to the treasurer's report.
You know what?
But I'll share that.
Other than we got the replacement $700 check because my mailbox was broken into and the original check was in the mail. Thank you. For those of you that don't have informed delivery, that's how I was like, and then we checked. So nothing happened to the check, but we did get a replacement check. So
We didn't forget about it. It's good.
Yeah.
no, they didn't forget about it. And we asked and they were very receptive and
Yeah, that's
people
good.
from the city
They
were.
replaced it very quickly.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So,
Nothing else.
yeah, nothing else on the treasurer's report. Okay.
Quick, just go back to the
Sure.
doodle poll, for the
Oh.
CPUN at the state capitol. Just FYI, I think 4 out of 5 of the dates that it's
Spring break. Yeah, I know. I think that I know I realize that it will affect people's availability. There is like the date in April,
Yep.
I think, on April 3rd. Part of it though is I didn't want it to go past the first week of April, just because that last month of the legislative session is insane, like those last weeks. And so I wanted to make sure that we could find a time where folks would have time to speak with us. And then just earlier in March, it's kind of like too short notice. So I would say like there are folks who aren't gonna be able to attend
Yeah.
because it's spring
No worries.
break.
Just, yeah.
But I think this is a good first, like I think it would be
We should make it
nice
an
to do as an
annual-
annual, yeah.
And is it for anybody in the community?
I think
there a
so, yeah.
max?
I
We
wanted
have
to
a
make
max?
sure, like, just to prioritize, like just selecting the dates so that folks on like the committee and on the CPUN board can attend if they want to, but then opening it up. I think we have to think about what, we're a registered 501c3. Like, so like keeping within that, like what sort of like did.
Yeah.
Like what sort of like what will the structure of the event be? But I think looking at, anyway, so come to like, we'll probably be communicating about it by email and then maybe set up like another just kind of quick Zoom meeting for folks who are interested in attending on how we want to use that time.
Hey Liz, there's a question in the chat from
Sure.
Nunn. She's curious what % of the voting residents in District 8 are from Central Park neighborhood? Do you know, does anyone know by chance?
What do they mean?
Like how much of District 8?
What's our representation?
Yeah,
of
like
the total district?
if there's,
Well, not representation, but like in
Yeah.
terms of people who vote, because we're a heavy voting group of people.
I would say that's a very good question. I would go to the Denver elections website and look it up. Like, I mean, like that's where you would find that data is just, but also just remember that like elected representatives represent all of their constituents and not just like the people who are able to vote. So but I would
Choose to vote.
I mean, we can kind of, I would encourage you, if you're curious about that, to look up the data on like Denver elections. And actually, that's something that actually would be really good just to have as like background for folks who want to participate in like the state capitol day. Is just kind of some stats on voting habits or like just because we are a very high turnout neighborhood. So I think that people are very engaged in the electoral process. I think getting folks engaged in like understanding policy and all of that is kind of like another step in civic engagement. So, okay, moving on to, we have 4 topics. This is just considering the co-hosting request from the INC. It's a Denver Community Film Fest night on Thursday, June 12th, time TBD. The screening is a documentary called Join or Die. I don't know if anybody else had a chance to watch it. Carol did. I watched it actually. And so it's about, basically, it's about a 90-minute documentary that is largely unpacking Robert Putnam's book Bowling Alone, which is about like the decline in civic participation in the US from like about the 1970s to today. And then kind of at the end, it talks about like what, you know, like actually he wrote another book about how he was only looking at the decline, but if you look actually at the period prior to like the start of the decline, it actually was a huge like rise in civic participation. And what kind of lessons can we take from that? I think it's actually like 100% in line with a lot of questions we're considering as an RNO, just about like, what does it mean to be a neighbor, like a neighborhood organization trying to connect neighbors with neighbors when you live in a community that has 30,000 people in it? And like, how do we want to organize ourselves? So that's why in the community survey, we have a question about, you know, how are you involved in your community? And just to kind of just gauge like what ways folks participate in like neighborhood life, or just also within just kind of like the civic life in the city. And just we have questions about, you know, how well, you know, how connected do you feel to your neighbors? How, you know, do you have do you have block parties? Do you have some sort of directory so that you know how to contact your neighbors? All of this, like, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to be a co-host on it. There's no monetary commitment. It's just for us to promote it, like for people to attend and to have one volunteer from CPUN. But I think it's a really important conversation that I think we would, you know, it would be really good for us to be an active part of.
Where would this happen?
It's like in,
Yeah, 30-second.
yeah, it's somewhere in the Highlands, like by North High School. Is where they're proposing it. And so it's sponsored by INC. They're looking for 20 co-hosting RNOs across the city, and they're currently at 10. So I don't know if I don't know, we don't have, anyway, we can just send around, like, I guess, Brian, I always look to you for the bylaws. Is this something that we should be voting on, or?
I think
we'd be
in
putting-
general, there's nothing in the bylaws, but I think if we're gonna co-sponsor, it should be a
Yeah.
group vote. So, yeah.
Yeah, do we want
I
to vote
think the
this
only
now or
concern-
do it by email, since we've got
Yeah.
several folks who weren't able, do we have a?
Well, I was just
Yeah,
gonna,
what's the?
got,
What?
got 7, 8,
We've hosted film screenings
Yeah.
as a group before.
9.
Recognize that might be against the whole point of bringing people together from across the city, but.
I was gonna say, we don't get a say in where they're hosting.
No, but I mean, we could just host it here, like for,
They do screenings at the Cube too,
Yeah.
so we're
Yeah.
not doing our own.
I think it should, yeah.
Well, I would say, like, usually it costs money to do a public screening, so
no.
I would rather
Well,
let
the
like,
MCA
like,
might consider sponsoring the
Yeah.
event by paying that fee and allowing use of the Cube.
I think,
Right here.
okay, dudes, like, this is like supposed to be that, like, I don't think like the spirit of the request is like, are we co-hosting this? And instead of saying like,
We got 9 people Unless someone's opposed to it.
But do we need somebody to like take the charge and do something?
Carol already, I
Oh,
think.
is Carol gonna?
Carol and Dave
We're in jail, so-
delegates at the INC, so like,
And I
on you
move we
guys.
co-sponsor this thing on June 12th.
Can we decide after June 12th it was popular enough to host?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely,
Would that be
like,
a more appropriate
yeah.
way to do that? Okay.
And I think, I do think like, so I will say, I watched it this afternoon with my husband. And we have a lot to talk about. I mean, there was a lot to talk about. So I think that like, there's the conversation that happens at that event. And then I do think.
No.
What was that? All right, thank you. In any case, all I'll say is like, I think that like we can have more than one conversation, like following the screening. And if folks really like it, we can try to like screen it here in the neighborhood too afterwards. Folks in Mystic. All right,
Ask if there's any objections.
Has any objections to co-hosting this? I see nothing in the room. I'm not in the
Nothing
chat.
in the chat.
Nothing in the chat. Good. We're co-hosting it. Thank you. All right. Then we have the next topic is the INC survey on the Community Empowerment Division. This is a lot of questions. But I did want to just kind of touch on them in case folks wanted to like provide their thoughts here in the meeting instead of having to write something out. Cause I know like Matt and Tommy emailed their thoughts and it was very lengthy. So just like what resources and support do you believe registered neighborhood organizations need to most effectively serve their communities? Not so much right now, but I think like just, yeah, I don't know if we have time for this right now, but I think that like if by like Friday, if folks want to share their thoughts, I think that, you know, basic like website, platforms for communication and Zoom are like just
Survey.
Survey Monkey, like all of that sort of stuff that we have struggled like even using the resources that the city provides already along that, like.
Yeah, like the electronic resources, like an
Yeah.
email distribution platform, like all of the things
Like a
that we've
CRM,
been
yeah.
working on would be,
Yeah.
I mean, we have the luxury of,
A budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I know so many families that don't have any access to that. Yeah.
Accessibility tools we talked about, I think when they were.
Translation, yeah, I was gonna say like language justice stuff.
Digital translation, I think like real-time Zoom call translation or something, an add-on. It's gotta exist. It has to be there somewhere.
Anyway, I would just encourage folks to look at the rest of these questions because I don't think we have time to really get into this. But
so they, what's the green group with the city government?
Casser?
No, sorry. It's like the old iteration where we used to like do things, we would like earn credits and, oh my gosh.
Might be before my
Jeff
time.
Brooks was, like leading the like initiative, it was like the green, oh my gosh.
So was it just kind of like a point system to incentivize sustainability?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but they could do that sort of thing with the RNO. It's because like the process of becoming an RNO has a pretty low bar.
But that's intentional, like that's on, like, it's intended to be like fairly open-ended so that communities can kind of organize themselves as they want and they just kind of get the information from the city. I know that that's the whole idea of this like new division is supposed to kind of be a little bit more handholdy, I think.
Yeah, but if they're talking about allocating resources, it seems like there should be minimum thresholds met for what RNOs like do for their community and like that they have bylaws, that they do make an effort to be represented.
Yeah, you can't be an RNO without bylaws.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a 501c3, but you do have to submit your bylaws. So that is, yeah.
And like, there's like, you're supposed to have community meetings, like at a certain like cadence, yeah.
Like as long as, like, I would say like you would have to be an established RNO for like doing that for like a year before they would allocate resources. I mean, I'm just saying, because otherwise,
Then again,
It's like, how do you get
Wow.
yourself established without those resources?
Instead of trying to reach your neighbors, like, it's the chicken and egg, right?
Yeah.
If you had these things that made it easier to get off the ground.
I walked flyers. I walked
Yeah.
flyers in this neighborhood for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, door hangers, flyers.
But you have the time and mobility to do that. Like, I'm just, if there's like a RNO to box kind of toolkit that they could, like a
I think that-
minimum entry.
Well, I think that there
And
is
then-
like an RNO handbook that hasn't been updated since the nineties.
And so to Amanda's point, after you've been established for a year or so, then you get the bennies, right? Then you've been around long enough and you get the good stuff to be able to grow and reach more. I don't know. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other.
I like that. There was a conversation about that out. I found out there's 278 RNOs in the city. And so and there were conversations about like, which ones are active, which ones should be
The
like. so-
MCA is like registered as an RNO, but it like is to get the communication from the city. It's not like, and
Well, and it is so easy that there was a point in time where Eastbridge was gonna have their own RNO just for Eastbridge, and there are, they never,
You never did it.
yeah, they never did. But it like literally there are RNOs within
Yeah.
RNOs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are the neighborhoods, and those are the ones, but then you can see there's like some neighborhoods and, like the MCA is a master community association. There are other master community associations that are smaller, condo buildings and stuff like that.
I mean, and that's what it's like, I know that there's like this massive list of our nodes, but like if you could differentiate like the list of people who get information from like the list of people who are actively seeking to build community where they live.
yeah.
it would-
Well, I think that, yeah, the office has to have kind of like around, yeah. So, okay, anyway, look at these questions if you wanna
Yeah.
respond. I'll also, I mean, they have like a Google form. I thought that it would be like efficient to kind of combine like feedback, but it seems like it actually people might wanna just like.
Do they
pull
have,
stuff?
they have the survey results from whoever did this, like however many years ago through,
City council person.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to request that from Councilman Cashman,
Okay.
so I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I have it. I
Yeah.
can send it on to
Oh, you already have it?
from, yeah.
The survey results? Okay, because I couldn't find it. All right, if you can share that actually with the board, that would be great. And then if we can kind of move on because we're now at 8:18. Get you all out at 8:30. So the community survey update and outreach needs, I think when I checked in with Heather, we were at 481 responses so far. I mean, and we kind of just need like another round of like sharing it out on Facebook, in the Facebook groups. We'll send out, I'll send out a standalone blast this Friday, so that, well, when people might have a little more time for, and also, yeah, before we send out a newsletter on Monday. Because that usually will get like a lot, more responses, but we're only planning on keeping it open through the end of this month. So again, if you folks can share it out. I will say that, one, thank you, Kristen, for getting the flyers to the apartments. No, so the QR code that I put on the flyers links to a different bit.ly than the one that I used, so I can see how many folks have engaged with each bit.ly link. And so there have been actually 80 80 kind of engagements through that. So I do think that we did get several responses from that, which 80 is better than 0, which is what we've had before. So
Well, then if we can do a full circle,
okay.
like provide them the actual results of it, then they can see
Yeah.
their voices.
Great. I see there's a comment. I can't actually see the comments in the chat if anybody, because I'm sharing my screen. Can somebody see that?
Says he's able to distribute flyers in Beeler North.
Oh, that would be great. if you can, here, actually, when I unshare my screen, Thomas, I will, just share my email address with you so that we can coordinate. And yeah, and we can share out the, I'll share the link once I unshare my screen. Or actually, Brian, if you're in there, if you can share the survey link in the chat for folks to take and to just share.
And just a generous offer, Thomas, just for clarification, we haven't done door-to-door flyer distribution.
No, we haven't.
I mean, I'm not saying that's not a great idea. It's just we haven't had anybody offer to do that.
It's a lot.
It's a
mean, if
lot,
folks
but
wanna
also
do
we
that.
need to print them and then we have the cost of printing them, or we need
Or
people
we'll just
have
go to-
the.
I was gonna say, if you've got a library card, you get 100 free color printouts using your library card. So I am happy to share, like, this is what I did with Kristen. I gave her the PDF, the print PDF to print out at the library.
What time period?
I don't know if it's every day or what. I have not abused that privilege, so I don't know. So, yeah, and actually that's something that I was going to ask Daria to talk about during one of our community updates, is just instead of telling us about events at the library, it's like, here are things that you can get with your library card that you might not know you can do with your library card. Because that was really a game changer. So anyway, yeah, so I will see, Thomas, thank you so much for volunteering. I want to get you my email address so that. we
Already
can-
in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Okay. If anybody wants to help with that, like, just contact me to coordinate. Our next communication and outreach committee meeting is going to be Wednesday, March 12th, after the survey is closed. So that'll just be an opportunity to start, I think, going over some of the initial results. And then I think that what I would like to do, I don't think we'll have it done in time for the March meeting because that's just, it's kind of fast. But for the board hour in our April meeting to do like a presentation on the survey results for folks. All right.
Councilman Cashman's survey has been emailed to.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
I found it quicker than Amanda did. Just saying.
I recently organized my files.
Sometimes Gmail with like the 12 million emails from CPUN.
Okay. Okay, and I guess the next topic, guys. We're in board recruitment season now. Basically, our deadline is we need to be able to announce the slate for the May board election by April 20th. So kind of moving back from there, we need to I am reaching out to all of the folks who have filled out the board interest form. We have 5 openings, 5 folks who filled out the board interest form. And there are a few folks I also did want to reach out to directly who have either participated in our committees and I think would be like good additions to the board, just to see if they are interested and have the capacity. So there might be a few more. If anybody else on the board knows folks that they'd like to invite to apply for it, please do. Like, this is an open process. Carol is going to be heading up the recruitment committee. If anybody else would like to volunteer on it, it's usually about 4 folks going through the interview. So it is like, depending on how many folks there are to interview, between now until about like the mid-April, I would say it's probably about, it can be about like between 8 and 10 hours, like, because there's discussion, there's the interviews themselves, the discussions, getting all of the materials together. So just in terms of the time commitment. Up in terms of folks who are up for re-election on the slate, it's Matt Blackburn, Courtney Dickey, Jamie Hodgkins, Brian Penny, Tommy Phillips, Jack Seward, and me. And so anybody who's on that list, if you don't want to kind of re-up or be on the slate for re-election, just let me know, or if you do, let me know. Also, just to, I skipped that bullet point. We also have an opening for an officer. Trisha let me know that she will be cycling off the board in May. She's running 2 businesses, will be on another board. And so graciously let me know. So we will actually have an officer opening for secretary in May. So, or is that in June? we do the officer elections. Yeah, so in June. So folks, just start thinking on that. But anyway, I appreciate Trish's work as the secretary this year, and then we will have somebody to kind of step into that role in June. So anyway, I think folks just email Carol if you're interested in serving on the recruitment committee.
You can't serve on the recruitment committee if you're on. this for re-election. Kind of a conflict of interest.
But it's recruiting new members, not the
Yeah, I mean, that-
election.
I'm gonna recruit bad members, so I look bad members. I get reelected.
Like putting together a slate, which should be a combination of existing people
Yeah.
and new people. And so if you found so many awesome new people and aimed at bump an existing person off. That was, I mean, I guess that's.
I think
That's the rationale. That's, yeah.
No, but I've served on the.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you.
You can recruit your.
Anyway, we can discuss this further, but like, if you're interested in like helping with the recruitment committee, contact Carol. And then we have, as folks can see, unfortunately, we have fewer people here than we usually have in person. But we
Like
have
the weather-
25 beautiful
Any
welcome
welcome bags.
bags.
You got 5? You got 5?
Fun to walk around your neighborhood.
I was gonna say, I'll get,
What? You're kidding. No, it wasn't. It was nice out.
that's okay. There's like, they get distributed when they get distributed. But if
You're gonna take
folks
5?
like can take, if folks who are here can
Double
take
that?
bags, or if you're online and wanted to help deliver bags, contact Matt Blackburn. And you'll get, 5 addresses about.
Yeah.
So don't worry, like, no shame. Sometimes it takes me weeks to deliver it.
Just take
To be
5 more.
To be perfectly honest,
I picked out 5
beautiful addresses.
right within walking distance.
So, okay, we have 3 minutes left and all I have to do is the March look ahead. So let's get to this. So our next meeting is going to be exactly a month from now, March 18th, 6:30 p.m. And this is the long awaited like Metro Districts 101 like explainer for like this kind of special taxing structure that is like part of our neighborhood that most people don't think about
Raise your
until
tax
they look
bill.
at their property tax bill. And so I think it's just an important thing for folks to be aware of and educate themselves about.
Are you familiar with it's a different community in Colorado where the taxing district structured itself so that it was only growing in interest and never.
Oh,
moving itself
in
down.
Castle Rock,
So,
somebody
yeah.
told me about that.
Can you be like ready to compare and contrast
Yeah,
the way that we're
They're
actually
definitely
down our debt?
paying
Like,
down.
okay. Great.
I don't know if they did
Yeah.
generate enough tax from there, it sounds like.
Yeah.
We don't have that. I also wanted to add that if anybody's interested, the Westerly Creek election
Yeah.
board is having an election May 6th and February 28th is the deadline to nominate yourself if you want to run to join the board. So
That's for the Westerly Creek Metro District.
Westerly Creek Metro District,
And
there are 2 vacancies.
what does it entail and what is I guess, like, what is the commitment of a board member?
It sort of is choose your own adventure, but we meet not necessarily every month on a regular schedule, but this last year we met almost every month. And I would say from I'm a director on the board, and from my experience, it's important to be engaged with the Park Creek Metro District Board, which does meet every month here in the Cube on the 4th Thursday at 9 a.m. every month. So, and you can do that one on Zoom as well, but like to me, it would be helpful for anybody considering joining the Westerly Creek Board to plan on committing to attending most of the Park Creek meetings as well. And we're trying to cut back our meeting schedule on Westerly Creek to meet less frequently.
Next month, you'll learn the difference between the two. And
And your relationships.
But when is the call for nominations due?
February 28th.
Oh, so that'll
So it's,
happen.
yeah,
that was-
unfortunately, it's, not.
About that, so that you can do that
intro.
I think there are legal noticing.
Yeah, it's like,
like-
yeah, that election's already in motion, so.
Yeah.
That is, so it's fine. I mean, it was in the community news.
Yeah, I've been sharing it out, so. Okay, all
MCA had sent information about it. So, yep.
right. Any final questions or like announcements?
One other thing, so
So-
we are gonna have a Central Park Classic mini golf tournament meeting next Wednesday. I think I have it on Zoom, but if anybody wants to meet in person, I would be game to meet in person instead.
So is it next Wednesday?
It's Wednesday at 2:30.
2:30, okay.
Wednesday at.
Oh, you already sent out the Zoom
I did send it to you
invitation.
before, yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna
great.
extend it to an hour. Just
Okay.
because there are a few things to just make sure we get covered and discussed. Everybody heard from, so. Next Wednesday, 2:30.
Okay. I'm seeing, no, I'm not sharing my screen. So I think we're good. It's exactly 8:30 PM. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I appreciate your time. See you next month on March 18th. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz.